Well, as I stated in the introduction, I did watch Kiss the Ground, a documentary on Netflix. And when it comes down to it, where, as Stephen Harris pointed out, here in New Zealand, many believe that we may already be what is termed regenerative, and we need to capture this for our consumer perception. However, whether we like it or not, documentaries such as Kiss the Ground do determine the direction and perception around the demands of our consumers. Overseas, the likes of Walmart are stating that they are moving into sourcing from practices such as regenerative agriculture. And I really enjoyed some more comments coming in from Facebook. Michael said, what is the consequences of consumers who are now more aware and probably don't believe the old? We have always been regenerative, quote. Surely if everyone was working well in sync with nature processes, we would have cleaner water, healthier pastures, people and animals that do not need constant over-the-shelf remedies. And Dan commented saying, if it's what we are doing already, then why would we have so much effect from droughts, floods, dirty rivers, and the need for vets? So some interesting comments there when it comes to the discussion of this opinion maker show, which is, are we already regenerative? And is this a direction for us to clip the ticket for the direction our consumers are demanding? Well, someone I thought would be extremely valuable to the discussion is the former CEO of 42 Below Vodka. He is involved in philanthropy group Pure Advantage. He has been involved with Saatchi & Saatchi in some of our biggest marketing campaigns. And proudly, the title I know he enjoys the most is he is a farmer from Lake Hawea Station. Geoff Ross joins us now. Geoff, thank you so much for taking the time to have this discussion. One I know that you are extremely passionate about. Now, buying Lake Hawea Station wasn't your first entry into farming. Could you give, to start with, some context in your passion and involvement for the primary sector in New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Sarah. So I grew up on a farm, like many New Zealanders, a dairy and deer farm in the northern Waikato. Went to Lincoln to become a farmer, did a BCom Ag, and loved it with the intention of going farming, but did get seduced by the advertising and marketing world for several decades, actually. So coming to Lake Hawea Station was a welcome return to farming, which was always the plan.
And when you purchased the property, what were some of the guiding principles that yourself and your wife Justine ensured were going to be the fundamental direction of the station?
Yeah, there were several. So the first one was the big macro trend in the world right now, which I think will get us into regenerative, and the opportunity for New Zealand is that consumers worldwide, the macro trend is they want to connect directly to the farm, the source. And so we saw a business opportunity first and foremost with being a farm, a provider of food and fibre that we think we can directly connect to other buyers with worldwide. So we saw an opportunity there. That was one guiding principle. The other one was environment. Look, we've always been passionate believers in the need to protect and enhance the environment. We're believers in that farming and environmental stewardship can go hand in hand. So we wanted to, I guess, to put that to effect and be a fantastic environmental custodian and also an effective producer of food and fibre as well.
Yeah. So we've had Stephen Harris, a Central Hawke's Bay farmer, on just before you, Geoff, who claims, like many in New Zealand, both from the scientific world as well as farming circles, that our practices in New Zealand are already regenerative. I'd like your thoughts.
I think they are, in the most part, regenerative. So the term regenerative, as I understand it, comes from the US, where a lot of pastures don't regenerate from year to year. They're one-offs, I guess. They're annuals. In fact, they're deliberately, in some cases, sprayed out, and then the pasture is retilled, or resprayed, retilled, and they go again. Whereas in New Zealand, most of our pastures do typically regenerate from year to year. The difference, however, or the piece that I think New Zealand needs to now go to is diversity. So we largely do have pastures that regenerate, but those pastures in many cases are mono or duocultures. So diversity is the piece I think we now need to start adding. So the more life above the ground means the more life below the ground, and healthy soils mean healthier animals. And the other cool thing about healthier soils is they sequester more carbon. And I think therein lies the opportunity, or one of many opportunities, in New Zealand kind of grasping this regenerative opportunity that the world is talking about, and actually being leaders in it. Because I think we've got some natural start points. We're in many ways we're in pole position really to lead it and be and use it as a competitive market advantage.
I want to get onto that competitive market advantage, as something that you know a lot about in terms of premium brands. But Geoff, when it comes to the right farm management practice for the right microclimate and geological makeup, Lake Hawea Station with merinos differs from Taranaki dairy country, as does cropping on the Canterbury Plains, and therefore the conversation really differs, and is something that will be a way. How do you capture a value whereby there's so much complexity around defining something as is regenerative?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think there's going to be a neat, succinct definition for regenerative agriculture as much as we'd love one. As you know, I come from a brand world. I think there's been thousands of people trying to put a neat, succinct definition to the word brand for years, and no one's ever achieved it. And I think that might be true in regenerative. However, there's some principles. And I think it's going to change from farm to farm. I think on our own farm, we're north of 100 hectares now in regenerative pastures, and we're still learning, of course, but we've noticed there's differences required from one paddock to another, from one end of the farm to another. So the differences across the country are going to be huge. What's going to work for one farmer is going to be incredibly different to another. Pasture selection is going to be very different. We've all got different farming systems, different climates, different soils. So of course it's going to change. However, there's some principles that can guide us, of course, and a key one for me is diversity.
So therefore, if we can't define it, how do we incentivize and to embrace the change of the consumer's demands on us when we are predominantly incentivized on production currently?
Look, I think if we have that conversation, I guess back to our first point, the world is able now to look into our backyards quite literally. So our buyers can see what our farms are doing. And if we tell that story with some honesty, we're able to demonstrate our practices and therefore get a premium to it. So I think if you look in the fibre sector, and New Zealand Merino, I think are leaders here. They're speaking to their clients. Their clients, like many the world over, are saying we want regeneratively grown products. And they are putting in place some guidelines for their growers, their farmers, to produce what they would term, and what we as growers would term, regenerative grown fibre. So if we create a definition and the world believes that definition, and it can be different from farm to farm, however, as long as we tell that story and we're open with it, that is going to be acceptable, and I think that'll be in fact embraced by global buyers and global consumers.
When you have a small supply pool in the likes of New Zealand Merino, or the sourcing of our value-added products, what would be your advice to larger processors and suppliers in capturing value in markets that don't yet appreciate these fundamentals of how we farm and grow, and the likes of our largest trading partner, that is China, and our largest trading commodity, which is dairy products?
I would say make a start. Like in any business, just start small, start somewhere. There will be a niche. Let's talk about dairy. Look, typically, and I'm generalizing here, China are typically late movers in global popular culture and global popular trends. So look, I think they will come down the track. If you look at the US, however, they're typically, not just in agriculture, but in all sorts of popular trends, whether it be music, movies, fashion, they're typically an early mover, and that will be the same in our food and fibre. So the demand in the US for regen is much higher. So let's start there. Let's create appropriate brands and products for that market, and in time that will grow to other global markets.
And Geoff, there is a goal of the station, I know from reading my notes here, that to move from a carbon neutral position, which you are currently marketing fibre on, to a carbon negative times 10. What's been your biggest learning in terms of where we are for the tools that our farmers need to actually define where they currently are and currently can move to, and the work you think needs to be done?
Yeah, and I think as Tim Brown from Allbirds said, carbon is actually the North Star. That's the big goal, right, for the world and every sector, particularly agriculture. Regenerative farming systems are a great way, a way the world understands of getting there. But there are other ways, of course. So you're right. So our own journey on carbon, which is the most important for us, is that, one, know our number. So we've looked at our vegetation, our sequestration, obviously our emissions, all our methane emissions, and you're right. So we're around 2.5 carbon negative, if you use that term. So we sequester 2.5 times more than we emit, and that is easily calculated by looking at our vegetation. We've had a number of experts in this field looking at our trees and regenerating bush to see what we're sequestering versus obviously what we're emitting, which can easily be calculated through Overseer. To get us to 10, the big hairy goal, that's a big step on. That's going to need some form of reduction in methane. We don't think we need to reduce stock numbers to get there. In fact, we're actually trying to increase stock numbers and increase production at the moment. We think we can do that through two means. One is regenerative agriculture looks as though it can reduce methane emissions, because basically diversity of diet, if you think, look, I know if I only ate lettuce all year and maybe the odd carrot, I know how my stomach would behave and what my methane emissions would be, versus if I had full access to the salad bar and I could self-select, I think my methane emissions would be a hell of a lot less. And it's true in stock. So by calculating that and measuring that, and there's a lot of science going on, Lincoln's looking at this as well, by calculating the methane reductions by better grazing, by better diversity, that's going to make a huge step for us. And then there's work in seaweed, for instance. Asparagopsis is a seaweed which can reduce methane by 90%. There's trials going on in Merino Station in Australia right now using that as a tonic. So if we can increase our sequestration but reduce our emissions through regen pastures and seaweed tonics or things like that, some of the new science that's coming, I think we can get to 10. That's the big goal.
And just closing there, Geoff, when it comes to the profitability of our farms, I understand from the work that you're involved with, Pure Advantage, the goal is to work out the relationship between the environment and the economy. What does utopia look like to ensure that we're winning on both scales?
Yeah, well, I guess in any business, what your goal is to ideally produce more, but from less, and then get a premium for what you produce. And so that's why we see regenerative as a tool. Look, we're early in the journey. Others have been ahead of us, but we look to producing more dry matter, more usable dry matter, particularly so for merinos, which are browsers, not grazers. So we think they're going to really respond to that diversity. And for less, so we think the inputs are going to be less because of regenerative pastures. We certainly don't need to till as much. We think we can do it with less fertilizer and potentially less irrigation. So that is the exciting thing from a farming point of view, is that we can increase production, but we can increase biodiversity as well, and then we can also sequester more carbon through more active pastures. Are going to be turning all that organic matter into liquid carbon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Geoff Ross, farming with his wife Justine at Lake Hawea Station, and of course from an extensive marketing background, building some fantastic New Zealand brands such as the likes of 42 Below, and is sitting on the board with Moa Beer and of course Acquia Candles.